Please welcome members of Elemica's research and development team.
What we're living in, let me tell ya. And it's a world that man can eat at all. When things are big that should be small. Who can tell what magic spells we'll be doing for us?
Mic check, works, awesome. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. That was a fantastic presentation, I must say. I wanted to do something interesting, but now that the bar is so high, it's going to be difficult. I have a green unicorn, actually, not a blue one. Let's see what it is. All right. Quick question. Let's see who can get what is common about these guys and what Elemica is trying to do. There's a catch. Non-Elemicans, please answer. You will get a gift card. 4 people, come on. The question is, what is common amongst these companies and how is it related to Elemica? He deserves one. What's your name, sir? That's a good answer. We need 3 more. It's all about the network. 3 more. Real time. Fast. Yeah, that's a good one. Oh no, good job. We have 2 more, and then we start. I'm sorry?
Facilitating collaboration.
That's excellent. We need another one there. You mentioned something? It's app-driven, so it's about usability and having things at your fingertips. Excellent. So a good round of applause to these winners, please. So there is 3 parts to our story today. This is a story about Neochemicals, and we're going to embark on a journey with Neochemicals, who's a seller, and they want to actually onboard themselves to Elemica, and we want to get them connected. So we're going to log into our network, and we're going to start there. We're going to connect Neochemicals as a seller to the Elemica network. We start off by logging to our network. We have multi-factor authentication enabled, and we use a third-party application called Authy in order to do so. So let's get into the network, and let's get into our connectivity. So this part is about establishing Neo's connection to Elemica. So we go ahead and create a new connection. The internet is a little slower than I anticipated. Give it a name. Fill in the details. As he does that, I'd like to point out that we currently support about 4 different types of protocols: HTTPS, AS2, SFTP, and SOAP. These are the most common protocols in the industry at this point. Authentication, certificate-based, user ID and password-based. Go ahead, we can download your certificate from your network automatically. No need to exchange digital certificates. Tedious process, usually takes about 6 days to 3 months, and we're going to go ahead and do it now. We're going to save the connection and actually test it. There you go. Let's go ahead and test the connection. It may pass or fail. Either way, it's an important first step. We take the pain out of the equation. And there you go, the connection is successful. So it's that easy to set up connectivity to your systems. So let's move on to the second task. That involves mapping. By the way, one thing I forgot to mention, the connectivity tool that I just showed you got a patent because we employ something called 2-factor authentication. And we can go into more details later if you're interested. Let's talk about mapping now. We're going to create a map. Neochemicals in this example, in this scenario rather, is going to receive an SAP IDOC document. That's everybody's favorite document type in this room, I know that. And well, it's a complex use case, so we thought we'll choose that. We go ahead and create the necessary data fields there, and it's going to take you directly into our second patented technology, where we use universal business documents. So these are our core canonicals that we use to represent specific business signals. So We have our representation of the universal business documents on one side and Neochemical's IDOC order create on this side. We employ a test-first approach. So we create a test first in order to see if we can generate a map successfully. Let's go ahead and create a test. Now, while we do this, we put in the source and the expected target. Take some time for Antonio to paste. All right, so we do see the actual partner structure and the expected partner structure. So there are a few gaps. I mean, it's highlighted in red. So what do? We need to fill some of these gaps. So there are quite a few ways of filling these gaps. And one commonly used methodology is we preload the system with a lot of libraries. So we have libraries specific to document types. We have libraries specific to business processes, business documents, and so on and so forth. In this case, since it's SAP iDocs, we're going to preload the system with the iDoc mapping documents, with the iDoc mapping libraries. Go ahead, Antonio. So once we do this, we see that we progressively reduce the gaps as it relates to mapping to the document. Go ahead, submit, and save. So the first test, if you remember, kind of failed. It had a lot of issues. So the second test is we're going to run it again. We do see that we've reduced the number of failures. The number of entries in red have reduced. So we're going to take that a step further and get it into a perfect match. So we employ JavaScript as a programming language for simplicity, ease of use, availability of resources worldwide, and so on and so forth. We go ahead, create a function. In this case, I think it's a date-time related function that needs a little bit of tweaking. I believe we need to split some dates across multiple fields. We're going to go ahead and do that, and Antonio is actually going to do it in real time and hope it works. It should. So this is worth watching because this is very close to magic. No pressure. So again, I mean, this is just one way. We also the underlying technology employs something called closure, and that needs a little bit of more skill set. I mean, it's limited skill set and it's heavy duty mapping, but this is easy to understand. I'm sure everybody here can kind of repeat this, at will in the break room. So it should be really easy to do this. And then we go ahead and save progress, and we choose the test, run it again, and there you go. Now there are no gaps in the expected structure. So what we've effectively done is we've connected Neochemicals as a seller to Elemica. Their order create IDOC document matches the specs as agreed between us. There was a delta, there was a gap. We filled it, and now we ran the test, we've implemented it, and we're good to go. So we've achieved connectivity with Neo, and we've got their mapping done. Now let's go ahead and implement this mapping. What we mean by that is we're going to go ahead and push it. When we say push it, we need to go ahead and create a contract. What a contract does is it relates that connection that we set up for Neo to the map that we just built. And that's important because we use message contracts as layers of abstractions in order to relate the message itself, the map itself, to the connectivity. And eventually you'll see how it goes on. So you see add services there, a little bit of a description. So we can add as many services as we want as part of this transformation. These services are typically, they fall into enhancements, validations, cross-references. If you want to, it can get pretty complex. You could do multi-destination routing, you could do message splitting, and so on and so forth. In this case, we'll keep it simple. And also take note of processing mode. We'll come back to that in a bit. There are 3 modes that the system works in, and it's pretty interesting the way it handles it. So let's go ahead and save this message contract. So we've effectively propagated the fact that Neochemicals is now ready for business on the Elemica network. So that took about 5 minutes. Not bad, huh, for an iDoc? All right, so that was the first use case. Now let's move on to the second use case. So Neochemicals obviously is not just satisfied by being connected to Elemica. I mean, who is, right? So the reason they come to Elemica is because they can transact with their trading partners. Network expansion is one of the key one of the key reasons why trading partners come to us. And we, as a company, need to ensure that we take the cost out of network expansion. We need to make it as easy as possible. Now, Mark mentioned something about collaboration. He mentioned about how important it is to actually get close to a customer. We also spoke a lot about how data is the new currency. Now, if you tie all of these together, without having a network and without reaching a critical mass really fast, you are not going to be able to achieve any of those goals, especially in a B2B world. And that's the reason why we take incremental costs, small costs out of each and every step so that we make it seamless, robust, and get to an end-to-end business process automation in a matter of minutes to hours, depending on complexity. So we are at a point where we're going to, who's the buyer? We're going to choose Uber buyer, okay? So that's the buyer that, the customer of Neo, and we're going to call them Uber buyer, and we're going to add them to Elemica's network. So we use something called a network configuration manager in order to configure a company's network. So in this case, we are expanding Neo's network. So we go ahead, we add a business process. A business process is a combination of different contracts. So we have preloaded the system with order management, vendor managed inventory, invoice, and so on. So those are the typical business processes that we automate. Now, we can add one or more message contracts to a business process. So if, as part of order management, say you don't want to do invoices, that's fine. You deal with order create, order changes, order responses, and ship notices. So the idea is to add a business process, and then we add a contract to the business process. And in this case, we're just going to go ahead and add the order create. And then we add, so you see that the order create business process has been enabled for Neo, and only the order create is part of the order management process. We go ahead and add a partner, who is Uber buyer in this case, to Neo. So Uber buyer is already connected to the Elemica platform. They send us a Chem XML document as an example. So go ahead and choose Uber. Uber buyer is in the system, and we add contracts. So in this case, Neo is going to receive an IDOC, and Uber is going to send a Chem XML document. We go ahead, set it up, and save using our network configuration manager, and you should have the relationship established. Again, keep in mind the 3 different modes. Let me pause there for a bit and talk a little bit about these modes. Think of them as when you're actually working with a trading partner and you're trying to onboard them onto the network, you're in configuration mode. You're not actually dealing with a heavy-duty production type exchange. That's your config mode. You design your maps, you test it out locally. Your test mode is when you say, hey, I have a connection with my test system, let our ERPs talk between each other. So that's when you use the test mode. So it involves promoting this configuration that you built in the config mode to your test mode. So we do have a promotion process in place. Do not review. Well, we also have a governance process in place, and Antonio is intentionally clicking the fact that it's a bad idea. But we're trying to bypass some steps to make it speedier. We employ a very strong governance process. There's a separate group of people who actually look at the output, they match, they certify, and so on. So that's the advantage of having different process modes. And live is the live production mode where you're actually transacting in real time between your 2 ERP systems in this case. So that's the code promotion process. And now we have the document. So we go ahead, submit a document, and I think Antonio did that in the background. That's why we lost visibility for like a few seconds. So we log in as Uber buyer onto onto the customer version of our dashboard, and we've logged in as Uber buyer, and they're going to be able to see in test mode that there is a message to Neo. So we go ahead, open up that message. You see a relatively good-looking view of the message. It's not as ugly, and then it also tells you that it was successfully delivered to Neo as a seller. So end-to-end visibility for a partner as soon as they log into the system based on some configurations that we enable using our network configuration manager. Now, let's take it a step further. Are you guys having fun yet? Okay. Let's take it a step further. I know a lot of you have heard from us about migration, about 1.0 and 2.0 and all that. So let me spend a couple of minutes giving you an overview of what the network bridge is. And again, I don't know how many of you have heard about the network bridge, but that is a distributed infrastructure software between 1.0, our existing system, and the new system that you're seeing here, 2.0, that enables routing of documents, and it also enables conditionally processing documents based on a partner, partner pair, and a document type in the 2.0 platform. So in other words, if Daniela is connected to Ono, you're both connected to 1.0. I just migrated Ono to 2.0. Daniela is still in 1.0. Your messages are visible in the 2.0 platform, and we can actually use it to enable a migration from Ono's perspective. In that regard, you and a few others like you will all be on the 2.0 platform from Ono's perspective. That's the idea. So, excuse me. So we enable the transition of a network or a subnetwork of a particular partner from 1.0 to 2.0, and that is what the network bridge allows us to do. The reason I say that is because so say there is a use case, okay? We get some demand that, okay, Neo Chemicals wants to work with Uber, and they realize that there is another company called Vintage Buyer, and they're connected on the 1.0 system. Now, how do we even know where they are? So let's go to Discovery, and we as Elemicans log in, go to Discovery, and we perform a search. We've been specifically told that Neo is looking for a buyer on QuickLink 1.0, and they have an additional requirement that the partner needs to be green certified. For some reason, they're environmentally conscious. All right, so we get Vintage Buyer. Okay, they're connected to 1.0 in North America, and they're able to send order creates. Wow, that's awesome, because that's exactly what Neo is looking for. Now, we as Elemica get this demand, so we go into our system, we go into the 2.0 dashboard to look for messages from a Vintage Buyer who is actually transacting in 1.0. The network bridge actually enables us to exchange these documents, route these documents that come into 1.0, we just route them to 2.0 and make it available. A copy of it is always available. So it does not prevent the processing in 1.0, but it actually sends a copy of that message to 2.0, which we can actually use. So I'm sure Antonio took a copy of that message, which we're going to use in order to go ahead and actually migrate them, okay? So what we've done is we've identified that Vintage Buyer is connected to 1.0. We have visibility of their transaction in the 2.0 dashboard. We take that message, and we go ahead and actually go back to our network configuration manager and create a business process and create a regression test in this case. So we are able to give it a name. So what we want to do is we want to ensure that the data, the output that Vintage Buyer will generate to Neo matches exactly with what Neo expects in 2.0. So in other words, what is in 1.0 needs to exactly match in 2.0. And we have a tool called regression test tool, which allows us to do that. It allows us to actually provide an input and an output and run a test. So in this case, it's going to take some time, so we may not have the luxury of time in order to see it to completion. What this effectively does is it takes the source message from 1.0, which is visible in 2.0, runs it through the process because we've created a link between Vintage Buyer and Neo supplier for the order create message in the 2.0 system, and we can run a regression test in order to see if the outputs actually match. Once the output match, then we know that we can guarantee that the upgrade is good to go. This is our way of internally certifying. Obviously, there is more to it. So in this case, this is an example of where the regression test is successful. So there are some cases where you see failures in regression tests. So let's pick a failure, and you can go back and you can look at the reason for failure. You can go through the flip books and identify exactly what the reason is for the difference between the actual message and the expected message. So this is how we actually use the regression test tool, the network bridge, identify a partner in 1.0, pass it through tests in 2.0, maps in 2.0, and if we identify any issues based on the regression test, we go ahead and iteratively adjust the map as we showed you earlier using our patented mapping IDE tool and ensure that the trading partners are able to exchange the messages in the expected format. So those are the three user scenarios I wanted to touch upon. I know it was a little rushed, but thanks to Mark Babbitt, he ate into my time. But that was a great presentation, though. So I kind of rushed it, but we can delve into some details if you're interested, or I'm open to question and answers. Rich, I think you should ask me a question.
When is the bridge going to be ready?
The bridge is being tested left and right at this point in time. We are undergoing some serious performance tests, and it's looking really good. End of November is when it will be released in production. We have a couple of interfaces that are already live, but we are internally monitoring it at this point. End of November. But that does not prevent us from migrating. So we are actively working with a few of our incumbent customers, if I may, on the migration process. So that is occurring in parallel, and the production version of it is going to be ready end of November. Any other questions? Susanna.
I have a question. I get a lot of questions from customers when it's about the upgrade, about available self-services for the customer to use the Elemica platform, which is different to what they are used in the past, how they work with Elemica. So what's our opinion and our vision about providing self-services to easier onboarding and to let the customer use the system?
Very good question. So I didn't touch upon the various aspects of the solution, but there is partner discovery, there is rooms, which are project rooms which you use for collaboration between trading partners as part of the onboarding process. There is the control tower, there's a transaction dashboard. A lot of these features are already being used by customers. So I would say that customers can access our system, and it is currently in use. Now, when you talk about connectivity and mapping, where we are now is we are actually trying to prove it to ourselves that we achieve a critical mass with it, so that we are very comfortable that there are no issues whatsoever, no issues when we convert it into a self-service mode, so that we take care of all the authentication mechanisms that are needed and ensure that it's completely bulletproof from an external usability standpoint. So once we hit a critical mass, hopefully we'll get there in the next few months, then we should start talking about opening it up in self-service mode. And that's a topic that Rich has already brought up, and we're going to discuss it maybe as early as Q1 or Q2 of next year. Any non-Elemican? All right. Thank you for your time, and hope you enjoyed the magic.